So why do you think nuances are needed more than ever now?
Because without nuance, it's so easy to miss people. I think that's the easiest way for me to break that down. Our culture, the people that we know probably, we're none of us are immune to generalization. None of us are immune to groupthink even. And don't get me wrong, groupthink is absolutely dreadful. It's horrendous. And but the reality is that because of culture and because of our experiences and even things like internet, it's so easy to fall into that. And if anyone has, that's okay. I'm not saying, like shame on you for that. It happens to everybody. But having said that, I think nuances are so important. It's because that's where people are seen the most. When you think about context, when you think about something that a person's been through, people have some of the most amazing journeys and stories, experiences that it always astounds me, some of the things that people have gone through. But you're not going to get that from generalization. You get that from context. You get that from nuance. You get that from simply listening to someone. And, I think a lot of times when we don't nuance, what we're really saying is we know better than you, right? We know better than other people. I think nuance is where we see really the beauty of people and their stories. And for me, because I see that, because I can make those connections, I don't have it in me to ever not nuance things and not think contextually. I mean, even with scripture too, and the Bible, one of the things that they teach in the interpretation courses is that you have to think contextually. And, a lot of the verses weren't written for 21st century American citizens. It was written for first century Jewish people, right? It was written for people in the ancient Near East. And even then you have to think contextually. And a lot of that still spilled over to me as I live today, as I do philosophy and psychology. I have to think about context and nuance. I have to think about what a person's been through, because if I don't, I just find that to be very unloving, at least in my life. And far be it from me to ever think that I know better than other people. I have to understand nuance in order for me to even say anything, right? And so that's just sort of the position I have. I do think it's really important, and I do wish more people would engage in contextual and nuanced thinking. But like you said too, I do it to a fault, right? It's like every conversation I have, it's always like, well, I don't know what you mean by that. So I always have to clarify things. So yeah.
I think a really powerful tool or system that we can create to, I guess, bet against or fight against groupthink, confirmation bias, normacy bias, whatever that is, because it's sort of what we talked about earlier, where a lot of people have the tendency to outsource their thinking to crowdsourcing or to other people. So they don't have, and a lot of that is intellectual laziness, frankly put, because thinking about deep thinking or thinking about thinking isn't always easy. It's not always pleasant. You have to examine yourself. You have to be introspective when you don't want to. You have to reflect when you don't want to. You just want to shut your brain off. And there's a lot of multitude of circumstances. A lot of people are forced with life that they don't really have the capacity to think about thinking. So I recognize all of that. But it really is important to think for yourself. And I think a good way to fight against the urge or this societal phenomena of death of nuances is having a great mentor or having people in your life that could help correct your course, so to speak. In our qualitative process for the podcast, you attributed a lot of your success or where you are in life to having great mentors and teachers. Of course, you're in academia, PhD, so there's a lot of mentors ahead of you. What does mentorship mean to you as a college pastor yourself, who is currently mentoring hosts of college students, trying to guide them towards a right pathway of life once they graduate from college, and also in your own personal life?
Mentorship is pretty important in my life. I'm where I'm at today because I've had a host of great and not so great mentors, right? Some for better and for worse. I've had a number of great professors who effectively mentored me. Now they'll never say this because I never asked them to mentor me. I just did the thing where I just asked them a bunch of questions and I asked them to hang out and stuff like that. So it's like unofficial mentorship, which is, I don't know. But those people, those mentors, so to speak, they shaped who I am today. They shaped how I reach out to people, how I love people. They shaped how I think. Even this whole like being a nuanced monster, right? I mean, I am the way that I am because of a lot of my mentors, because they help me understand the importance of thinking contextually. And they're far better than I am at doing any of this stuff, right? The philosophers that mentored me, the theologians, the pastors, they're way better than me at all this stuff. But for all of us, this isn't just a spiritual thing. I think for any of us, all of us, that we ought to have mentors, because the reality is that we need people in life. We need people to love. We need people to love us. We need people to guide and to shape and to direct us. And I think it's wonderful to be able to have that sort of relationship. Now, having said that, I understand that it's not easy for a lot of people. Some people might struggle with authority figures. Some people might struggle with vulnerability. And I definitely don't want to discredit any of that stuff. At least for me, there's been a lot of blessings because of that. And my hope is to reflect a lot of what I've been mentored in, to reflect that to the people I mentor as well. Now, hopefully I do a good job, right? That's always the hope.
I want to be more specific and concrete with you to provide some more tangible value for the listeners. So I think it's really important to contextualize the type of mentors you seek and then the type of feedback and advice you seek. What I mean by that is, as I get older, getting closer to 30, I realized you have to do a lot of vetting through, is this the right mentor for me? Is this person going to give me contextualized and fitting advice that's fitting to my life and who I am? So for example, I will never ask someone for feedback or mentorship from a non-podcaster about podcasting. If they've never had a podcast, if they've never done this creative avenue, anything they tell me based on proxy exposures or whatever, it's irrelevant to me. They have no idea what they're talking about. It's almost like plagiarizing or regurgitating something else they heard. They're like, hey, Benoit, you should do this. And I would ask, do you have any podcasts yourself? How many years have you done it for? What type of podcast do you have? What's the genre? What kind of guests do you have? And all these questions are the things we have to contextualize even with the type of people we seek. So how do you personally do your vetting process when you seek out a specific mentor that you think could impart you wisdom or give you benefits or empower you in a certain way? And what would you say to listeners that want to seek out valuable and contextualized mentors in their own lives, but they don't really know how to approach the process because vetting is not always easy?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'll first answer that portion about the self. If someone is desiring a mentor or something like that, and I want to connect this with something that you said earlier, because this is so important. There needs to be grace for yourself. Like that has to exist. That has to be predicated on, right? And I say that because no matter what our methodology is for looking for mentorship or anything for that matter, there's always going to be holes in our logic. There's always going to be holes in our methodology, and that's okay. That's a consequence of us being human. It's all about trial and error. And the reality is that because people are people, and there's so many variables, there's so many things that contribute to a person being a certain way or acting a certain way. There's no way for us to be able to sniff out everything. There's no way for us to be able to know the ins and outs. We can't predict the future. We can't predict people. Now we have good reasons to think certain actions and think certain things, but that's not really the same as like omniscience, so to speak. And so it's so important for all people to really have grace for themselves, to be able to even have the capacity to make a mistake, meaning that, oh, maybe this mentor wasn't the best for me. That's really okay for us to think and for us to feel. That's not toxic. That's not bad at all. I think the apprehension that a lot of people have is we do want to get this right, because with mentors, we're going to be vulnerable. We're going to be challenged. We're going to be pushed. And it's not an easy thing for a lot of people to sit with. Even for me, sometimes it's not easy. And that's okay. But again, having the grace to even tell yourself, you know what, this mentor didn't work out for me. It's okay. I learned a lot, and I'm going to find another one. I'm going to find someone that might be able to meet my needs. That's all permissible. And that's, in fact, rhetoric that we should be saying to ourselves over and over again, right? Because we are way too hard on ourselves in order to get things right, like we almost expect perfection some more often than not. And this isn't for everybody, but I know for a lot of people, they want to get things right. There's this urgency, there's a desire. But to even tell yourself, hey, it's okay, I didn't get it perfect this time, that really goes a long way. Just to have grace and compassion on yourself. We need more of that in this day and age. As for my methodology, I think one of the things that I really like doing when I'm sort of seeking mentors is, I like to ask myself, can I be friends with this person after mentorship? I personally don't think mentorship is lifelong. I think it's within a specific time frame. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be a couple of weeks. For every person it's different, but I do think there's a certain limitation with mentorship, because once you're mentored in a specific area, then you've grown in that area and you have the liberty to thrive now, right? You have that capability. And so now you're sort of equal in a manner of speaking, right? Obviously, you'll always look at someone highly and they'll always be a mentor and you'll always have that gratitude. But at some point, you're going to grow in those areas that you're seeking mentorship, and you're no longer going to be mentored in that area. And so having said that, for me, again, I like to really look at people. Can I be friends with them? Can I have a meaningful relationship with them outside of even mentorship? Can I go to this person to tell me what I need to hear, to be gracious, to be compassionate? I really look at that relational component, because that's so important. Because I need someone to be able to share with me things that I will be able to understand, that will make sense to me. And so, yeah, that relational component is something I look for. But in terms of the areas that I want to grow in, whether it's pastoral or philosophically, I go to people that I know are experts. My supervisor at my doctoral program, his name's Greg. I never formally asked him to be a mentor, but I consider him my mentor, right? He teaches me a lot about philosophy. He teaches me a lot about what it means to be a good professor, or how to lecture well, and all these things. Another friend of mine, his name is Brandon, same thing, right? He's a great theologian. He's a great pastor. And I learned a lot of stuff from him. And so, and I can see myself having relationships with these guys, even outside of that mentorship thing. And so it's so important to find that person that can have that relationship with you, or at least in my mind.